guys, it's Deepika, and I am so excited because I have my very good friend Angie here with me today. Angie is here because I want her to share all of her pro MUA tips on all things dark circles.
Okay, so the first thing I always tell people when you're doing your makeup is to make sure that your skin is hydrated, prepped, and ready to soak in all of the layers that we're gonna put on.
Makes sense.
So first things first is I'm gonna put an eye cream on her. And the one we're using today is the Ole Henriksen Banana Bright. I love this because it has a little brightening tint to it. And it's really, really good for all skin types.
First and foremost, can we start with tips on how to find the right color corrector?
I always say if you're Deepika's skin tone, which is like tan, I would go for an orange corrector. If you're anywhere darker than her, I would go for a red. And then if you're anywhere lighter, I would go for a peach or a pink.
Cool.
And also, if you pull a lot of blue, you could use pinks because those are really, really good.
And the reality is it's not an exact science and you have to know your skin color. One thing that I was always taught was that it's not always the color of your skin, but it's also the color of the discoloration. So you could be my skin color and have really intense dark circles and use a deeper color corrector.
Right. I use Rise. And I focus it, look up, all in this little slope right here.
Okay.
So I like to go in layers.
Yes.
The whole key to color correcting is light layers and giving it time to sink in. You have a little bit of darkness right here in the corners too, so I'm just gonna dab a little bit there. So I'm just gonna let that sit, and I'm gonna take a tiny little beauty blender. So I'm just gonna use this to correct and just dab it in like we talked about before. Do not swipe, and you can see the difference of when it's blended and unblended. Now I'm going in with Perk, and since this area right here and right here are not as dark as her dark circles, I'm gonna lighten it with a lighter shade, and I'm going to drag this down. And this area right here that slopes a little bit, it'll catch shadows when she smiles. Naturally, our cheeks go up when they smile. So that's why I like to correct it with a lighter shade.
That's a tip I would never have done. That's really cool.
And also you have a little vein here, and it's blue tone, so that's why you want the peach.
I think, and I've said this before, but the best way to describe this is looking at a color wheel. Like if you stare at a color wheel, you'll see what colors cancel each other out. Greens get canceled out by reds. I think it's blues get canceled out by oranges.
I'm also going to use a different part of the sponge, the one that doesn't have the orange color on it. I'm just going to pack it in. We're going to be using two concealers. We're going to be using a neutralizer, and then we're going to be using a brightener.
Okay.
So the first neutralizer is this LC Tan, and the reason I use a color that's closest to her natural skin tone is because it's going to neutralize all of the corrector. So this layer is going to be thin, and I'm going to switch to a slightly bigger sponge, and this is also a beauty blender. It's called the Blusher.
Okay, Angie, I'm going to ask you a real question. You need to be honest about this. Would just the concealer have worked?
You would have had to use more concealer, and you're still always going to see that color underneath, whether it's in photo or whether it's in video. The reason for color correcting is because it completely cancels it out, and that's what you want, especially when you're doing like red carpet or photography. So you can see this is one layer of concealer, and we're gonna go in on the other side. And with my brush, my foundation brush, I'm tapping. Again, no swiping, because then you're gonna remove the layers of corrector that we did.
I think that's a great tip for everyone at home who's like, well, how do I not just make it look like a big red mess situation?
I've gotten that from clients. They're like, how come when I correct, I could still see the orange? It's normally because you're either using the same sponge for everything or you're swiping. Now I'm gonna go in and cover the corrector that's around her mouth. This you can also do with foundation, but I prefer doing spot concealing with this part too. I'm gonna go in with Butterscotch from LC. This is a medium coverage, and it's buildable. So if you want it to be heavy coverage, then you could just let it sit for a minute and then go in with another layer. We never put any foundation under her eyes, but I did use the sponge to blend around. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to take medium tan, so it's one shade lighter than the first concealer that we used.
To brighten.
To brighten. So we don't need to apply a bunch of concealer up here. We can actually use the blender and blend it out before we apply it, so it's not like caked up, you know? So I'm just going to blend it out on the back of my hand. Okay. And I like the pointy tip of this sponge because you could really cut, especially if we had a bunch of eyeshadow, we can cut that eyeshadow and really lift her eyes. And now that everything's blended out, I'm gonna take some setting powder. And the one that I used on you when I did your makeup at the Globes is the KKW number 3.
Has yellow undertone.
It has a yellow undertone, which is also great for color correcting. And I'm gonna use the sponge that I used for the brightening aspect. And I have the powder in my hand. I'm patting it out so it's nice and smooth on the sponge. And we're gonna pat it under the eyes. The reason I like to really press it in and semi-bake is because you don't want any of that concealer or corrector to move.
If you want to see more video collaborations with us, want to learn more tips from a makeup artist, let us know down below what you want to see, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.